And last week when I talked about Ecclesiastes, this idea that I used that was of a man, the author here, Ecclesiastes is kind of the Latinized version of it, but Kohelet, or the preacher, the man who wrote this, who we're pretty sure is Solomon, he's been on this journey looking for the meaning of life, and he's been kind of grabbing at things, trying to find that foothold, trying to find that purchase. And everything that he's been grabbing at has been, so far, so much vapor. He's been trying to grab onto that for some purchase, something to grab onto, something to find actual ground to stand on, to move forward on this search for meaning. And so much of what he's grabbed hasn't been solid, hasn't been anything. It's just been vapor. He's been grabbing at wisps and smoke. And we saw that finally he got a foothold when he talked about the relationships that we have as people. When he talked to us about the true meaning of life really being found in the relationships that we have, that a life lived for ourselves and by ourselves is without meaning, but that a life lived with others and for others gives life meaning. And there he finally found some purchase. He found something to grab onto, a step finally on this ladder that he's trying to go on. And then last week we saw another foothold, another place to grasp onto as he talks about the worship of God. So from the relationship of mankind to each other, now to the relationship that mankind has with God. And then giving some more purchase to this. And then here in today's passage, as we look at this long passage, and it is a long passage, and I guarantee you I know it's Time Change Sunday, and I'm tired, you're tired. It's my least favorite Sunday of the whole year. And so as long as this passage is, it's not a complicated passage, I promise you, which is why we're going to cover so much of it. But as he gets to this part here, he talks about money. Money. Everyone's favorite topic, money, right? Everyone loves money. Or at least we love money, but we hate to talk about money. Because as soon as you start talking about money, people start to get uncomfortable, especially in church. And trust me, nobody is more uncomfortable talking about money in church than the pastor. Trust me on this. Okay? So, we're going to talk about money. And it's a big part of life under the sun. And as we look at this, we might think that, a weird thing, I went to go do this on my paper, to scroll my paper. It doesn't work like that. As we think about life under the sun, money is something that is inescapable. It is such an intricate part of our life. It just can't be avoided. It is such an indwelt and imparted part of our life here, especially life under the sun. So it has to go there. Ecclesiastes, this whole book about life under the sun and the meaning of life, it has to come up to money. We've got to talk about money because money is such a big part of our life under the sun. And as I said before, and another pastor said this, so I'm stealing it from him, but the wisdom books as a whole teach us about life. They teach us things. And this other pastor said that the Psalms teach us how to worship, the Proverbs how to behave, Job how to suffer, Song of Solomon how to love, and Ecclesiastes how to live. Because that's what Ecclesiastes is about. How do we live this life that we live under the sun? And so as uncomfortable as it is to talk about money, it is part of our life that we live. There's a pretty popular rapper. I don't listen to rap, but I just been around. There's a pretty popular rapper a while ago who said that the whole part of life, he put this philosophy of life out there that became really popular and still is really popular. And that whole philosophy was get rich or die trying. That was his whole philosophy of life, was get rich or die trying. And that became a real big push there in a lot of society. Or maybe you've heard the saying that's probably a bit older, a couple of generations before that, was he who dies with the most toys wins. This is a part of our life here. We live in a life that has to do with money and wealth. And this passage that we're going to look at here takes us to dealing with money and wealth to figure out how the godly man or woman is to live their life under the sun and how that relates to things about money. Because there's this idea that God doesn't like money. That's the preachers who like money, but God doesn't like money. We even misquote the Bible and say that money is the root of all evil, when it's actually that it's the love of money that's the root of all evil. And so we're going to see in this passage how to deal with money. How do we relate with money? And it might seem, as I was out with Gail here, it almost seems like such a change of topic that you almost dropped the transmission out of the car. We shifted so fast into gears. You almost just be like, oh, hold on a second here. I can smell the transmission burning, because you're talking about our relationships that we have with people and the wonderful worship of God, fear God, and this is the sum of our lives, to worship God and fear Him. And then money. Like, what the heck just happened? But it's not as much of a change as we might think. Because we might think in that, well, we were on this train that was going this direction, and now you're changing. No, it's trust me, it's a continuation of the journey, and it flows naturally out of it. And so if you'll follow along with me, we're going to read Ecclesiastes starting in chapter 5, verse 8, all the way through to the end of chapter 6. It's a lot of scripture. I know it took up both sides of that scripture insert, just about. But if you would join me either in that insert or in your Bibles, and you would join me in Ecclesiastes chapter 5, starting in verse 8, we read, if you see in a province the oppression of the poor and the violation of justice and righteousness, do not be amazed at the matter, for the high official is watched by another, and there is yet higher ones over them. But this is a gain for land in every way, a king committed to cultivated fields. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This also is vanity. When goods increase, they increase who eat them. And what advantage has their owner but to see them with his eyes? Sweet is the sleep of the laborer, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep. There is a grievous evil that I have seen under the sun. Riches were kept by their owner to his hurt. And those riches were lost in a bad venture, and he is a father of a son, but he has nothing in his hand. As he came from his mother's womb, he shall go again, naked as he came, and shall take nothing for his toil, that he may carry in his hand. This is also a grievous evil. Just as he came, so shall he go. And what gain is there to him who toils for the wind? Moreover, all his days he eats in darkness, in much vexation, and sickness, and anger. Behold, I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in the toil with which one toils under the sun, the few days of his life that God has given him. For this is his lot. Everyone to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them, and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil, this is the gift of God. For he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. There is an evil that I have seen under the sun that lies heavy on mankind, a man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, honor, so that he lacks nothing of all that he desires. Yet God does not give him power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. This is vanity. Excuse me. It is a grievous evil. If a man fathers 100 children and lives many years, so that the days of his years are many, but his soul is not satisfied with life's good things, he also has no burial. I say that a stillborn child is better off than he. For it comes in vanity and goes in darkness, and in darkness his name is covered. Moreover, it has not seen the sun or known anything, yet finds rest rather than he. Even if he should live 1,000 years twice over, yet enjoy no good, do not all go to one place? All the toil of man is for his mouth, yet his appetite is not satisfied. For what advantage has the wise man over the fool? And what does the poor man have who knows how to conduct himself before the living? Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the appetite. This also is vanity and striving after wind. Whatever has come to be has already been named. And it is known what man is, and that he is not able to dispute with one stronger than he. The more words, the more vanity. And what is the advantage to man? For who knows what is good for man while he lives the few days of his vain life, which passes like a shadow? For who can tell man what will be after him under the sun? And so we read these passages here, and it tells us so much of life. And some of it's hard, and some of it's easy to understand at first glance. But we're going to look at this all. And the heart of this whole section here is found in 18 through 20. And this is kind of set up in what they call a chiasm. That's a really fancy word to say that it's kind of set up like an idea sandwich. So we have the central idea. We have other ideas that kind of go out from that in either direction. So they kind of have an idea with a corresponding idea down here, and then another idea, and another corresponding idea, and then at the middle of the passage is where the main idea is. So you kind of think of it like a wedge, where if you were to take the scripture and kind of say, these verses and these verses relate to each other, and then these two passages relate to each other, and then there's a middle section that kind of stands out on its own. And that's kind of the center of the idea. And in this passage here, that central idea is found in verses 18 through 20 of chapter 5. And we see around that, kind of in those sandwiches here, in the different layers around that, we see verses 10 through 17 and 6, 1 through 7, which kind of touch on the same idea, presenting to us different grievous evils that are perceived in the world. And then we have the opening verses of 8 through 9, and then the closing verses of 10 through 12 in chapter 6. And those kind of introduce the idea and then conclude the idea with similar ideas there. But the heart of this all is that the enjoyment of life doesn't come from wealth and things that we accumulate, but from God who gives us life. Only by looking to him we can find true joy in the things under the sun that he gives us. And so we see in verses 8 through 9 the introduction to the idea that we have this presented to us, like I said, almost out of nowhere, talking about money. But money is something that's so much important to us than we realize. And there's a painting, if I could have the painting up there. There's a painting, this painting right here is called The Money Changer's Wife. The Money Changer and His Wife. And this man, you can see, is counting out gold coins as his wife is trying to do her devotions. And she's trying to be very diligent in her devotions. We can't tell exactly what she's got there for a book, but the painter of this painting was clear to make it look like scripture on one page, and then the other page has a picture of the Holy Family kind of icon, in its iconic look there. And so we see that even in this image here, this is very old. This was painted in 1514, so it's not a new painting by any stretch. It's not a new problem that we have. But that money is a distraction. We see that here is she's trying to do her devotions. Right? She's got her book out there and says, I'm gonna read my Bible and do my devotions over here. And her husband's over here with his gold coins, weighing out each coin very diligently. And she's just like, Yeah. Money is distracting. It is a distraction of our life. And that's understandable. Ecclesiastes doesn't judge us by saying this is a distraction. It says, how do we deal with that distraction? How do we approach money in a way that it's not going to distract us and take us away from our relationship with God? And that gets to the main point of this passage. Money can be a problem for those who live under the sun, but there's a way to live with life. There's a relationship there, that relationship that we have with money, where it's not an issue. And these opening lines from verses 8 through 9 point us to the beginning of things by pointing us to greed and corruption and bureaucracy, and it just takes us to the beginning of this idea from a very institutional level. You see corruption and greed and all these things that happen, and you see someone who is doing things unjustly. Don't be surprised at greed, is what he's trying to say. Don't be surprised at greed, because not everybody has a good relationship with money. Don't be surprised at greed. And he seems to say that no matter what, any place where you have people, it's almost like people are sinful, and that any situation where you have an organization of people, it's going to be messed up. Because he says, well, you see that these unjust things are happening. Well, don't be surprised at unjust things happening, because if you see a man who's doing unjust things, well, he's got someone over him, and they have someone over them, and they have someone over them, and there's whole layers of people that are built into the system, and every single one of those layers is just piling upon corruption and sin upon sin, because we're all messy people who do messy things. Organizations are flawed because they consist of flawed and messy people. So don't be surprised at that. He says, don't be amazed at that. Now, he also doesn't offer any solution to that other than to say, you're going to see this in life. When you see it, Don't be surprised. Organizations, especially ones that have layers of bureaucracy and layers and layers and layers of people and leadership and stuff, and leaders upon leaders upon leaders and management and stuff like that, the more of those type of layers you get, you're going to have corruption. It's interesting, Ecclesiastes is a very real book. He doesn't offer us any platitudes or any ways to get out of this. He just says, yep, that's a thing. Don't be surprised when you see it. And then just, okay, moving on, he says. Moving on. And it's a very real thing that we see in this life. And it's almost this transitional passage where he kind of starts with this idea, by presenting this idea, yes, you're going to see corruption and greed in this world. Don't be surprised at that. And then he takes it down from that institutional level and brings it right down to the individual level, starting in verse 10, by telling us in a very clear way in verses 10 through 17 of chapter 5, but also repeated in chapter 6, verses 1 and following, that the love of money will never satisfy. The love of money will never satisfy. And while there's not a lot we can do about the institutional problems of money, greed, and corruption, he brings it right down to us. Because there's nothing I can do about a system of corruption and a bureaucracy that breeds sin and corruption and oppression. There's nothing I can really do about that. But I can address my own heart and my relationship with money. And that so that if I'm a part of that system, maybe I can be part of that system, the layer in there that maybe stops the oppression. But I can't fix that system over there. I've got to deal with hearts. And it reminds me of the change of the Roman Empire that became from this military pagan empire of many gods and systems and corruptions and all kinds of stuff, and to this more or less Christian political entity, and changed the whole world. And how did it do that? It didn't say, well, let's tackle the system. It said, let's change people's hearts. And so that's, in a sense, what the author of Ecclesiastes is doing here is, we can't change the system, but we can change our hearts. And so he goes to this by telling us a simple truth, that the love of money will not satisfy. Well, that seems pretty cut and dry, right? We're told here that he who loves money will not be satisfied with money. It will never be enough. It will never be enough. And this is not about what tax bracket you're in or how much money you have. This isn't about someone who has a ton of money versus, oh, you only got to worry about this if you've got a lot of zeros in your bank account. This could be someone who has 6, 7, 8 digits, whatever, in your bank account. Or this could be the person who has nothing but zero in their bank account. This isn't about how much money you have. This is about what our relationship to money is. How do we look at money? How do we relate to money? What is money to us? Because you can love money and have a lot of it, or you can love money and have very little of it, but still have a life that is centered on how much money you have. It can never be enough, we're told here in verse 10. Our sinful hearts draw us to never see that we have enough. And you can see it with those who win the lottery, whether they win $500 million or $1 million or anywhere in between all of that. About 70% of people who win the lottery within 5 years have nothing and are declaring bankruptcy. Because it was never enough. And we might say, well, man, I really wish that I could, if I had $1 million, that would solve so many of our problems. But here's the thing, if you have $1 million and your satisfaction is built upon, if I had this much, it's never gonna be enough. Because there's always gonna be something more. There's always gonna be the next thing. Even Rockefeller, the famous billionaire and philanthropist and all that stuff there, he was famously asked which one of his millions that he had earned was his favorite. And he very famously said, my next million. Because it was never enough. It didn't matter that he was the richest man on earth at the time. It wasn't enough. It was the next million. It was chasing after the more. Because it didn't matter how much he had, it was never going to be enough. And part of the reason is, we're told in 11, that the increase of money simply increases the problems that go with it. We're told here that when goods increase, they increase who eat them. If you have more stuff, You'll just find more ways to spend it. And I've looked at this. There's been numerous studies and stuff that have gone on over the years. And I remember reading a study ages ago that proved this point, that as people move up in tax bracket, as they move up in income, they find ways to spend more money. They just it doesn't matter how much money they have. I found a way to live when I was younger, before I had kids, before I was married. I found a way to live with very little. Now, granted, I was homeless and on the edge of homelessness many times, and had no food, and would often go to the grocery store with $3 in my pocket. And how much food can I get for $3 to get through a week? But I made it through that with a fraction. Now, I'm not wealthy, but I made it through that with a fraction of what I have now. And he said, well, now aren't you somebody? Well, yes, now I'm better off and stuff. I have a little bit more breathing room, but I still find ways to spend what I have now too. It's not like now I've just had unlimited surplus of stuff, because our means grow to fit what we have. If I have more money, we tend to buy a bigger house. We buy a newer car. We spend more money on things in life to kind of fill that gap, and we end up with the same margin. Whether you have this much, whether your income is here, or your income is here, or your income is here, we tend to always stay with that same margin on the outside of the extra. No matter how much money we have, that margin still ends up being the same. And if you think about your own life and how you've changed your stations in life, you'll find that that's true. No matter where you were, whether you only made $20,000 a year or $10,000 a year, or you were ever be so blessed as to make up to $100,000 a year, or anywhere like that, you'd probably look and say, well, yeah, no matter what, I always ended up with roughly that same margin of stuff, the same margin to live by. He says, why? Because as we increase money, we increase those who eat the stuff. I can very well attest to that when I had very little, I was alone. All right? Then I married my wife, and together we made more money. Obviously, there's two of us now. Well, now, but there's also 2 mouths to feed. And then we had children, and we moved up in life, and we had more children, and we had more stuff, and we had more children. And no matter what, we had more literal mouths to eat what we were doing. And so it's very hard to, again, escape that margin. And it's funny, we're told here in verse 12 that even the worker sleeps better than the rich man. Because not only does there's more people, but the more stuff you have to worry about. The more stuff you have, the more worry you got to worry about. I went up and, well, I won't talk about him by name, but I went up to South Dakota and picked up a boat with somebody. And I was reminded of a friend of mine who had a boat, and I guess there's an old joke that says, the best days of owning a boat are the day you buy the boat and the day you sell the boat. Because buying a boat is nothing but a headache. And because it's all just maintenance, it's all just stuff. And I think about that, I grew up with a friend who had so much stuff. They had 3 houses, and they had boats, and they had a condo, and they had cars, and they had all this stuff. But the more stuff they had, the more they got to worry about now. Because then we got the boats, and we got to winter them somewhere. We got to put them someplace. We have all these houses that we got to make sure are being maintained. We got to do all this stuff. We have all this stuff to worry about and think about. Versus, I think back to when I had very little in my life. There was so much less to worry about. Just worry about me, and that's all that it was. And so he says, yes, the rich person has a hard time sleeping because he's got so much stuff going on. And we can look to the farmers among us and say, well, if you work hard, you probably sleep hard. I know when I was working at UPS and I was moving 1,000-something boxes an hour, I slept hard because I worked hard. And he says, yeah, the person who labors hard will rest hard. But the person who's rich and wealthy and has piled up all this stuff, he's going to have a hard time sleeping because of all the worry and concern over all this stuff. And he moves from that place there, telling us about the simple truth of if you're looking for satisfaction in life in money, you're never going to find it. Because money, like so much else in this life, is vanity. It's just emptiness. It doesn't actually go anywhere. Just like him trying to climb that ladder, it's just a vapor. It's just a smoke. There's nothing there to grab onto. And he tells us about this grievous evil here in verses 13 through 17. And he tells us about this one who chased after it all, who kept his wealth to his own hurt. And we might say, what is that talking about? And I was reminded in this of a song by Casting Crowns called American Dream. And it tells a story that fits this perfectly. And in that song, we follow a man who's chasing it all. And even with good motives, the song tells us to give his family finer things. But the refrain tells us, the refrain of that song says, he works and he builds with his own two hands, and he pours all he has in a castle made with sand. But the wind and the rain are coming crashing in. Time will tell just how long his kingdom stands. And the song goes on to tell us about his life gradually falling apart, losing time with his young son, eventually losing his marriage, and eventually the job itself, only to turn around and realize that he had nothing. He chased after something that could not be gotten, satisfaction with the things of this life. And we're told here that this one person who kept it all, this person who hoarded it all, who's chasing after it all and wanted to have it all, and in trying to grab everything, found himself where he lost everything. And trying to hold on to everything, he realized the thing he was holding on to was empty, and it was to his hurt. And that he didn't have anything. And there came a time when he realized he turned to his sons, we're told here, and when he turns to his son and he has nothing in his hand. He has nothing now. He tried to have it all, and in trying to have it all, he finds himself one day with nothing, because he lost it all. And now he has nothing. And verse 16 reiterates that this grievous evil, this man ends with nothing that he toiled for. He toiled and he toiled and he toiled, and he worked, and now he's got nothing. And yes, we're told that that does happen sometimes, but this man had put all his meaning in all this stuff and tried to hold on to it, and it was nothing, and now he is truly lost. And we're told here that his life ends not with him clinging to his riches, but in darkness. I love this word, vexation, the frustrations of life, anger and sickness. That's what told his life ended, because he tried to cling on to it all and he couldn't, and it was nothing. He learned the hard way that it was all vapor and mist. And we're told in a parallel passage, and at the second part of this in chapter 6, verses 1 through 7, we're told about the person who had it all as well. And this guy has everything. We're told a man who God has given all kinds of riches, but he has no ability to enjoy them. Just like that first man who had all this stuff and was trying to hold on to it all. This guy has it all. He's got all these riches, but he cannot enjoy them. And we're told that this is the second grievous evil thing, because he has no satisfaction in life, because he cannot enjoy these things. And we're even given this wonderful example. He takes it to the max that even if this man lived 100 years, had 100 children, and lived for 2,000 years, this would be the biggest blessing you can imagine. I mean, the long 2,000 years of life, and up to 100 children. And even if he was given all this stuff, it would mean nothing. In fact, it would be better if he would not have been born, because he couldn't find joy in this life. Because he couldn't find satisfaction. Because the things that he was looking for satisfaction couldn't yield the satisfaction that he longed for. And so he's left where we're told here, even if this hypothetical man lived for 2,000 years and had 100 kids, it'd be better off if he was never born. Because without being able to enjoy the things of this life, it's nothing. It's all meaningless. No matter how long you've lived or how many things you have in this life, if you can't enjoy the things as they are meant to be enjoyed, then it's all nothing and it's all meaningless. And so how are they to be enjoyed? Well, we're told that in verses 18 through 20, it all comes down to relationship, just like the human lives at the end of chapter 4, where the gain and purchase in life, where the thing to be found onto is found in having relationships and not being alone. And just like that second foothold there, where our worship of God is based upon our having our right relationship with Him, understanding that God is in heaven and we are on earth, we're found here that the key to our relationship with money is finding satisfaction where satisfaction is to be found. And the satisfaction of life is not found in the money. The satisfaction and the joy of life is found in God. And it's only from Him that we can do that. And at the heart of our relationship that we have with money, just like our relationship with others, is knowing our place and its place in our life. We were told when in regard to our relationship with other people in chapter 4, verse 9, that two are better than one. We were told this fact. And we said, well, yeah, of course, that makes sense. Our relationship to other people and our place with them, that being with other people is better than being alone. And then we were told with our relationship with God, that the heart of that, in chapter 5, verse 2, we were told that God is in heaven and you are on earth. Right? Checking our relationship, our place with that, our perspective, how we relate to God. And we're told here that how we relate to money is exactly the same thing. We're told here that how you need to know where you are and your place in this, and that money's place in all of this. And where is all that to be found? Well, we're told here that he has seen what is good and is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in the toil which he toils. But we're told that this comes only from God, that God is the one who gives all this, that the wisdom that has been wrought from the crucible of life by our guide, the writer of Ecclesiastes, he has found in his search as he looked down all the roads of life that we can never travel. He says to us, enjoy life. What is the secret? Just enjoy life. Now, unless we take this as some kind of saccharine Hallmark greeting card type of, don't worry, be happy, he's saying, no, it's not just that. Because this whole book has been saying, I've gone down that road and that road and that road and that road, and I've done all these things and I've searched all these things, and let me tell you something. It's not about any of that stuff. Because all that stuff is nothing. You have to know to just be happy where you are. You can almost hear him pleading in his voice. Just be happy where you are. Because you have, right now, so much. It doesn't matter if you have so much in your bank account, or if you have so much in your family. It doesn't matter what you have right now in this life, or how little you have, or how much you have, or any of that stuff. No, it doesn't matter. Wherever you are in life right now, you have so much. Because of God. Because God gives you life itself is the treasure that he gives you. Wherever you are right now, you are alive. If you were hearing my voice, you are alive. I'm going to just go out on a limb. If you're watching us online, or you're listening downstairs, or I don't know if anybody's outside listening through the radio system that we have still, but if you're hearing my voice, you are alive. And it doesn't matter what you have, whatever else you have in this life, you are alive. And he says, that is what God gives you. Enjoy that. Take appreciation of that fact. That is where our treasure is. And he tells us this here. He says, life is short. Enjoy what you have. Enjoy it. And the ability to enjoy it doesn't come from us. We have to look to God. Because we're told here that the very ability to enjoy this is from God. We have to turn to him. Because he is the one, even in the grievous evil that we just read about the man who had all this stuff, but God did not give him the ability to enjoy it. We're told in verses 18 through 20 that everyone to whom God has given wealth and possessions and the power to enjoy them. God is the one who gives us the power to enjoy those things. And the power to enjoy them comes in accepting his lot in life, understanding who we are in relation to all the things of this life, accepting our lot, and enjoying your work. Just enjoying life, rejoicing in the toil. And what is our lot in life? We're not God. Sorry, I'm not God, you're not God, none of us are God. We try to be God, though. And he says, what is our lot in life here? Well, from chapter 3, we're in the river of time. We're in the place, in the space where everything has a time and everything has a season. And we're living out what God is working in and with and through us. And he's making all things beautiful, we were told in chapter 3, verse 11. All things beautiful in their time. God is working through all these seasons and the things of life. And he's doing this thing. And we're along for the ride. We're in the river of time, and we're going through the ups and downs and the eddies and the twists and the waves and the turns and all these things in life. We're not God. And we're told here to just know your place in this world, that that's where you are, and enjoy your work. Enjoy your work, because the point of the toil is not to pursue satisfaction in money. The point of the toil is that this is life. This is life, and this is the life that we have. And that it is in these things that peace is found. It echoes what Jesus tells us in John 14:27, where he says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give it to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, and let them be afraid." And as Jesus prepared to depart the world, he told his disciples this thing, that yes, this life is short, and yes, it's going to come to an end, but I'm going to give you something here, because you have something more than just this life, and this is this thing that I'm going to give to you. The peace that I give you is a peace that's centered in the fact that God loves you, and that he will go above and beyond to save you. The preacher here in Ecclesiastes discovered that life under the sun can indeed be monotonous and empty, but it doesn't have to be if we include God in our life. Life is God's gift to us, and we must accept what he gives to us. And as it closes out here, it closes out with just some questions. It asks us essentially the same questions it asked at the beginning. What's the point of it all? Right? More words or more vanity? What's the advantage of all of this? Who knows what's good for man? Who knows what's going to come after him? And all these questions that he has. And it brings us right back down to the question of the whole thing. It points us to our needs in this world. Our need for someone to come from not under the sun to save those people who are under the sun. It points us directly to the fact that this world is broken. It leaves us longing for something. The eternity that we're told in chapter 3 was placed into our heart. We're told here, who can tell a man what will be after him after all the days of his short, vain life in this world? And it leaves us with an ache. It leaves us with a pain to say, there's something. And that ache and that arrow points us straight to the cross of Christ. And it has to, because he shut down every avenue of thought and exploration of all of life to leave us only to look at the cross. Because it was there, someone who was not under the sun, not cursed to this life, came to show us that the things that are under the sun that are vain and empty are nothing to be compared with a life in him. He came to show us the way that we could have peace and that we could find satisfaction in life, not with the things of this world, but by being adopted by the very God of heaven. That in him we could be freed from vanity, that in him we could find satisfaction in life. Our satisfaction isn't found in money and things. Our relationship to money has to be exactly what he tells us here. Our relationship to money is just this. Money is a thing. It's part of life. But it's just it. It's just a thing. It's just a part of life. It has no special power. It has nothing else. It is just a thing that is part of life. Don't let it rule your life. Don't make it the thing that governs your life. Your meaning comes from God. That's why we do things that's why God says, with giving and stuff, giving is a part of our worship, because we come before God and we say, this thing that you gave me, it's not my meaning of life. God, you're my meaning in life. So I give, whatever, sure, you can have some of it back. I don't care, because it's not my life. It's not my life. It's not my meaning. It's nothing. This is just a thing. Whether I have a lot of it or a little of it, it doesn't matter. I'll come before you and I'll give it to you. I'll join in with other people and I'll worship here, because this is where meaning is found. It's not found in things and money and all that stuff. It's found right here. That's what he calls us to. So if you join me as we close in prayer. Father, we thank you